Does XState have a good TypeScript experience? How type-safe can you be with XState? That's a big question for XState because XState has a lot of different APIs and different places that could be type-safe. And so I'm going to show you all the efforts we've put in to making XState type-safe. In this example, I've got a machine which can be either toggled on or toggled off, and I send it a toggle event in order to tell it which way to go. The thing here is though that by default this toggle event won't be strongly typed. So I can send any event to my machine, and even if I misspell it, like for instance give it the wrong case, this isn't going to yell at me. I can change this by adding schema events with this syntax here. This is going to give me a warning now if I'm trying to send an event that isn't specified in the events up here. So here I now got to say toggle is the one I should provide. If I want to provide multiple events, let's say I want to toggle on and toggle off separately, then I need to provide them in this union type here, because this is the union of all possible events that the machine can receive. And this means that I'm going to get some errors here, but it's going to tell me that I'm correct when I pass either toggle on or toggle off. In XState, you can also provide this context, which is kind of like a data store that belongs to the machine only. And here we're creating a count of all the times that the machine gets toggled. By default, this will be inferred just from the type that you pass into the context here. So we can access state.context.toggleCount, and that's already type safe for us. You can also ensure that arbitrary values are passed along with the events by adding like a count increment here. So these objects, they can also contain any arbitrary values whatsoever. And this ensures that these need to be passed along with whatever you send to the machine. So context and events type safety. For the longest time, that was the only type safety you could get in XState. For instance, one thing that stands out to me is that state.matches, this function here, you can put anything in here, whereas really this can only be either toggled on or toggled off. So this is a great spot where we could get some type safety. Luckily, we've improved this massively, and with a simple extra addition, you can get type safety on a ton of different XState features. All you've got to do is add TS types with an empty object there and save the file. Now, when you have the VS Code extension, it's going to add this type generated file here. We'll look at what that does in a second, but just by adding that, I now get type safety on state.matches. This type_gen file is the one that's automatically generated by the VS Code extension, and you can see that matches states here are being generated to toggled on or toggled off. And here contains a ton of meta information that we use in XState core to power all sorts of cool type safety stuff. Let's see what else this type_gen can do. I've added actions increment onto either toggle off or toggle on, which means that we're going to call the increment action whenever either of these events happen. And something interesting is happening, which I'm getting an error down here inside my use machine. That's because it's expecting 2 arguments but got 1. So it's expecting me to pass a second argument here, which I happen to know is an object. Inside here, it's telling me argument is not assignable because actions is missing. Actions and then increment inside there. So it's telling me that this machine now won't work unless I pass increment into the actions here. It also knows which events cause which actions. So here, increment can either be caused by toggle off or toggle on, in which case it's inside the event, it's telling me it can either be toggle on or toggle off. And if I remove one of these, let's say we only increment when we toggle off, event will now change. So it's now only toggle off. The same type safety applies to services. I've now added a toggling off state when you toggle off, which runs an invocation, which takes an async check before it goes to the toggled off state. Same for toggling on. The way this looks in code is we have our toggling off state, which invokes the toggle off invocation, and the same for toggling on here too. And you notice we're getting this error here because we haven't provided all of our services to the machine here. These services also know which events cause them. So if we add context and event to this one here, then event is going to be typed by the toggle off event, because that's the only way that you can enter the toggling off state, which triggers the toggle off invocation. You start to see how all the data flows start matching up here. You can also get type safety based on what the promise services are supposed to return. So here we're saying that toggle off the service here, its data is void, so it's not supposed to return anything. But if I say instead that it's supposed to return like ID, which is a number, then we're going to start getting an error down the bottom here. And this error is only going to be resolved if we return an ID with 123, for instance. So this means you get type safety here too. I've now also added an action onto the onDone here. OnDone is kind of like an event that happens when the toggle off completes here. And so if I add this action on toggled off complete, I should be able to receive the data that came from the invocation. I'm seeing this red line in my actions here, which means I have on toggled off complete. And inside the event here, if I add context and event is going to be typed with the data, the ID number that's coming from down here. And if I change this to, let's say, a string instead of a number, then that's going to change down there too. And that means we're getting an ID string here, and this is going to give me an error until I pass it a string. You can probably start to see a pattern here, which is that guards, actions, services, delays, they're all type safe with the events that cause them. For instance, here, our isTrue is being caused by toggle off. And this is going to give me an error if I don't add my guards. This is going to give me an error if I don't add my isTrueGuard, and the event is typed to the correct event that causes it. The final piece of the puzzle is that tags are also type safe. You can add a tag to different states if they both need to show a similar thing on screen at the same time. For instance, here we have toggling off and toggling on. We need to show a loading indicator in both of those cases. Down the bottom, we can check if the state has that tag, and if it does, we can show the loading indicator, and these tags are type safe too. So the question is XState with TypeScript a good experience? And the answer is yes, if you're using type generation. The type gen opens up a whole different world of possibilities that you can really get amazing inference for very little cost. This is all built in the VS Code extension, but if you're not using the VS Code extension, you can use our CLI, which is available on our docs site. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to post more XState videos on this channel, so please stay tuned and subscribe. Thank you so much.